To understand power in the 21st century, you must follow the oil. And if you follow the oil, you inevitably arrive at one name, one force, one political machine that controls more geopolitical energy than any country, company, or traditional empire in history. The House of Saud. Forget the crowns and the castles for a moment. Picture the year 1932. The place is a desolate, dusty patch of sand in the Arabian Peninsula. Life here is brutal, dictated by the sun, the scarcity of water, and the ancient, feuding tribes. The region is so poor, so disconnected from global wealth, that the entire annual budget of the nascent Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was less than a single wealthy American family, like the Vanderbilts, spent on their summer yacht. There was no wealth. There was only dust. Fast forward 90 years. That same family, the House of Saud, is now considered the world's most powerful royal dynasty, controlling an estimated $25 trillion worth of oil reserves, the largest contiguous pile of wealth in human history. Their private family fortune is unofficially pegged at around $1.4 trillion, making them exponentially richer and more influential than the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers at their peak. They do not just own wealth, they own the energy source that powers the global economy. This is the story of how a single Bedouin warrior, operating from the ancient forgotten city of Riyadh, managed to unify a collection of warring tribes, strike a pivotal bargain with the United States, and leverage a dark, sticky substance pulled from the sand into the ultimate instrument of global power. It is a tale of calculated brutality, prophetic vision, and the greatest, most consequential financial deal ever signed, the Pact of the USS Quincy. Our story begins with the man who built it all, Abdulaziz ibn Saud, often known as Ibn Saud. He was a colossal figure, physically imposing, deeply charismatic, and utterly ruthless. When he was born in the 1870s, his family, the Saudis, were in exile. Their ancestral home, Riyadh, was controlled by a rival tribe, the Rashidis. In 1902, at the age of 26, Ibn Saud led a daring raid on Riyadh. With only about 40 men, he recaptured the Masmak fort in a legendary cinematic assault. This was not just a victory. It was the founding myth of the modern kingdom. It showed his tenacity and his destiny. Over the next 3 decades, Ibn Saud fought a grueling, relentless campaign to unite the peninsula. He did not use modern armies. He used the Ikhwan, a zealous, disciplined religious militia drawn from the core of the conservative religious movement. This alliance was the first and most crucial pact of the House of Saud, the marriage of the political power of the Sauds with the religious authority of the puritanical clerics. The Ikhwan provided the fighters and the justification. Ibn Saud provided the leadership and the political vision. The kingdom was declared in 1932, but the triumph was tenuous. The new kingdom was large, but it was desperately poor. It was surviving on meager revenues from the annual Hajj pilgrimage. Ibn Saud needed money, and he knew it could not come from his traditional rivals in Europe. It had to come from a partner who was far away and who had an insatiable appetite for what he hoped was buried beneath the vast, empty deserts. In the late 1930s, the only people interested in the desolate Arabian desert were the American geologists from Standard Oil of California, SoCal. European companies had largely dismissed the region. SoCal sent their toughest, most resilient drillers into the brutal H. The search was torturous. Years passed. Holes were dry and money was running out. The American team was about to give up. Legend has it that they were drilling their last well, Dammam Well No. 7, near the Persian Gulf. They named it the Prospect of Despair. They had hit nothing but salt water and rock. They decided to drill a few 100 feet deeper, a final, desperate gesture before retreating forever. On the morning of March 4th, 1938, something extraordinary happened. They struck oil, not just a well, but a gusher that signaled the discovery of the legendary Gawar Field, the largest conventional oil field ever found on Earth. The House of Saud had won the lottery of history. The discovery instantly transformed the entire geopolitical equation of the world. But now, Ibn Saud faced a greater challenge than uniting the tribes: how to manage a fortune that could break him. He needed a protector, a partner who could defend his oil from the predatory empires of the Old World. That partnership would be forged in a warship in the middle of a war. The year is 1945. World War II is winding down, but the world order is being violently reshaped. The United States is emerging as the new global superpower, and its strategists, led by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, understand one fundamental truth: future global power will be powered by oil, and the oil is in Saudi Arabia. Ibn Saud was keenly aware of his new, terrifying importance. He had the oil, but he had no navy, no air force, and no industrial base to protect it. He knew that if he did not align with a superpower, Britain, Russia, or another colonial power would swallow his kingdom whole to seize the oil. The meeting was arranged with the utmost secrecy. On February 14, 1945, President Roosevelt, returning from the Yalta Conference, met with King Abdulaziz Ibn Saud aboard the USS Quincy in the Great Bitter Lake of the Suez Canal. The contrast between the two men could not have been more striking. Roosevelt, the sophisticated, polio-stricken Democrat from New York, represented the pinnacle of Western industrial might. Ibn Saud, the massive desert king, arrived with a vast entourage, including his official coffee maker and a collection of goats for fresh milk. He represented the ancient, unforgiving rules of the desert. What they signed that day was not a formal treaty, but a gentleman's agreement, a pact that defined the second half of the 20th century. The terms were simple and their implications were staggering. The Saudis' promise: the kingdom would grant the United States, through its companies, which would eventually become Aramco, exclusive access to its oil reserves, ensuring a steady, cheap, and massive supply of crude to the West. This effectively powered the entire post-war boom in America and Europe. The American promise: the United States would guarantee the security of the House of Saud. The pact was not just about oil, it was about ideological non-interference. The U.S. agreed not to interfere with the internal affairs of the kingdom, particularly its strict religious and political system. In exchange for oil, America agreed to overlook the internal structure of the regime. This deal, the USS Quincy Pact, created a symbiotic, often deeply troubled, but unbreakable alliance. The U.S. got the energy to fuel its rise to superpower status, and the House of Saud got the ultimate insurance policy for their survival. It was the moment the Saudi royal family became not just a regional power, but a vital piece of the global machinery. The torrent of oil revenue that followed the pact was unprecedented. The gold began flowing into Riyadh, transforming the dusty, isolated capital into a burgeoning, modern metropolis. But the sudden influx of wealth created its own political instability. The king now had billions, but he had to find a way to distribute this wealth among his vast, sprawling family and his increasingly modernized subjects without undermining his own authority. This challenge would define the next generation of the dynasty. The first king, Ibn Saud, died in 1953, leaving behind an astonishing political and biological legacy. 36 sons from multiple wives, and an estimated number of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, reaching into the tens of thousands. The sheer size of the royal family presented a colossal management problem. Unlike the centralized European dynasties like the Rothschilds, who relied on primogeniture, wealth passing to the eldest son, the House of Saud had to devise a system for sharing the oil wealth that kept the thousands of princes loyal and prevented the family from fracturing into civil war. This system is the hidden economic genius behind the dynasty's survival. It can be called the system of shared prosperity and controlled access. The fiefdoms of ministry. Instead of letting one prince control all the money, the top positions, ministries of defense, interior, foreign affairs, and the powerful National Guard, were distributed among the most senior and influential sons. Each son, and later favored grandsons, received a dedicated fiefdom, complete with its own budget, patronage network, and even, in the case of the National Guard, its own private army. This system was designed for consensus. No single prince could seize total control. The private stipends, the thousands of lower-ranking princes and princesses were kept loyal through a massive, non-public system of direct stipends paid out monthly from the royal treasury. A high-ranking son of the king might receive millions annually. A junior, distant cousin still received enough to live a comfortable, elite lifestyle. The simple act of receiving a check from the king's treasury every month was a constant, powerful reminder of where all power and wealth originated. The business integration. Beyond direct cash, the princes were given massive preferential access to state contracts. A prince did not need to be a brilliant businessman. He merely needed to be a royal intermediary. Foreign companies seeking to win lucrative infrastructure, defense, or service contracts in the kingdom quickly learned that having a high-ranking prince as a silent, well-compensated local partner was the only way to do business. This effectively made the entire private sector an extension of the royal family's patronage network. The result was the creation of a ruling class that was massive, incredibly wealthy, and wholly dependent on the stability of the central throne. They ruled through consensus, patronage, and the sheer, overwhelming distribution of oil revenue. This made the wealth of the Saudi royal family unique. It was not a single, centralized fortune, but a vast, hydra-headed network of decentralized, state-derived riches, all anchored to the king's ultimate control over the oil. The sheer scale of this private-public fusion is what makes valuing the dynasty's true wealth nearly impossible for outsiders. For the first few decades after the USS Quincy Pact, the oil flow was smooth and controlled by the American-led Aramco. The Saudis were the silent partner, collecting royalties while Western companies managed the extraction and pricing. But this relationship was doomed to change. In the 1960s, a movement began among the oil-producing nations to reclaim control of their primary resource. This movement coalesced into the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. Saudi Arabia, initially a cautious member, would ultimately become its indispensable leader. The moment the House of Saud truly flexed its geopolitical muscle came in 1973. Following the Yom Kippur War, in which the United States supported Israel, the Arab oil-producing states, led by King Faisal, decided to use oil as a weapon. They announced an oil embargo against the United States and other perceived enemies of the Arab cause. The effect was instant and cataclysmic. Oil prices quadrupled overnight. Gas lines snaked around blocks in America. Energy costs paralyzed industries across the West. It was the first time in history that a group of developing nations had dictated economic policy to the developed world, simply by turning off the tap. This was the pivot point. The 1973 embargo taught the world two crucial lessons. Oil is power. It proved that the House of Saud did not need a nuclear arsenal or a large projection military to exert global pressure. Control over the supply of energy was infinitely more effective than a traditional military threat. The Saudi sovereignty, it signaled the end of the post-colonial era where Western companies dictated terms. The Saudis and OPEC now controlled both the supply and the price. The financial implications were enormous. The sudden explosion in oil revenue, the petrodollars, created a flood of cash that the kingdom could not possibly spend internally. This led to a second, more subtle financial innovation: petrodollar recycling. The Saudis, now sitting on a tidal wave of cash, agreed to invest much of it back into Western banks, particularly U.S. Treasury bonds. The U.S. guaranteed the kingdom would sell its oil in dollars, ensuring the dollar remained the world's reserve currency and creating a perpetual demand for U.S. debt. In essence, Saudi Arabia was financing America's budget deficits, creating a symbiotic financial loop that further cemented the unbreakable security arrangement forged decades earlier on the USS Quincy. The embargo was a brief, public flash of power, but the petrodollar recycling that followed was the silent, long-term establishment of the Saudi financial empire. The immense wealth and power of the House of Saud was bought at a specific cultural price. The dynasty had made a deep political and social pact with the ultra-conservative religious establishment, the Wahhabi clerics. This partnership dates back to the very founding of the kingdom, where the Sauds provided the sword and the clerics provided the religious legitimacy. As the oil wealth poured in, this bargain was reaffirmed and expanded, becoming the bedrock of internal stability. The terms of the grand bargain were: the religious establishment was given full control over social life, education, and the judiciary. They dictated the laws of personal conduct, enforced strict segregation, and ensured that the rapid, jarring modernization brought by the oil money didn't erode the moral foundation of the kingdom. The dynasty's immunity. In exchange, the clerics provided the ultimate religious stamp of approval for the king's political power. His foreign alliances, even with the infidel Americans, and, crucially, his absolute control over the nation's wealth. They agreed to remain silent on the opulence and high-stakes geopolitical maneuvering of the royal family, so long as the family upheld the core religious principles in the public sphere. This bargain allowed the Saudi royal family to pursue two contradictory goals simultaneously: global integration. They could invest billions in Western markets, buy cutting-edge military hardware from the U.S., and participate fully in the global economy. Internal control. They maintained an internal system based on ancient, highly restrictive social codes, which placated the conservative heartland and prevented the rise of any popular religious opposition. The system was a sophisticated piece of political engineering. Any opposition to the king could be painted as a challenge to the entire religious and social order, effectively silencing dissent. The money bought the tanks and jets to protect the kingdom from external threats, while the clerics provided the internal firewall. However, this bargain was always a source of deep tension. The vast, private wealth and luxury enjoyed by the thousands of princes was a direct contradiction to the austere message preached by the clerics to the populace. This hypocrisy was the long-term Achilles heel of the dynasty, a crack that would widen over time, threatening the very foundations of the state. It was a Faustian deal that brought stability for decades, but accumulated immense social pressure beneath the surface. As the 21st century dawned, The sprawling, consensus-based system created by Ibn Saud began to look outdated. The world was moving faster, and the old system, where every major decision required the slow agreement of a council of senior, aging princes, was too cumbersome to deal with modern threats like global terrorism, low oil prices, and the rise of new rivals. The stage was set for the arrival of the most controversial and powerful figure in the dynasty's modern history, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. MBS represents a radical break from the consensus-driven past, where previous generations governed through quiet negotiation and shared spoils. MBS moved with speed, ambition, and a level of ruthless centralization unseen since the time of Ibn Saud himself. His rise was marked by two massive, interconnected campaigns: the war on the internal consensus and the vision of economic transformation. The most shocking move came in November 2017. MBS launched an unprecedented anti-corruption purge, rounding up hundreds of high-profile princes, ministers, and billionaires and detaining them in Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton Hotel. This was not a fight against genuine corruption, which was endemic in the system, but a massive, calculated consolidation of power and wealth. The political purge. By locking up the most influential princes, MBS destroyed the old fiefdom system. He centralized control over the Ministry of the Interior, the National Guard, and crucially, the Sovereign Wealth Fund. The wealth grab. The detained princes were not freed until they agreed to turn over vast portions of their wealth and assets to the state. Unofficial estimates suggest that the purge funneled anywhere from $100 billion to $800 billion back to the crown, a staggering transfer of private royal wealth back into the hands of the ruling king and his chosen heir. This act was a clear message. The system of shared prosperity was over. All power, all wealth, and all future decision-making would now flow through the king and his inner circle. MBS broke the foundational rule of the dynasty, the necessity of consensus, and replaced it with a command structure. The money that was once used to buy loyalty was now weaponized to enforce obedience. With the financial and political system centralized, MBS launched his ambitious plan to future-proof the Saudi economy, Vision 2030. This vision is a tacit acknowledgement of the dynasty's ultimate long-term threat, the world moving beyond oil. Vision 2030 aims to achieve a total transformation, diversifying the economy, privatizing portions of the state, and attracting massive foreign investment into non-oil sectors. The most visible manifestation of this ambition is the construction of a series of breathtaking, multi-billion-dollar megaprojects. NEOM. The centerpiece is a planned $500 billion linear city called The Line, designed to be a 170-kilometer-long skyscraper in the desert powered by zero-carbon energy. NEOM is intended to be a hub for technology, tourism, and next-generation living, a direct statement that Saudi Arabia can build the future better than anyone else. The tourism push. Projects like the Red Sea Global, turning vast coastal areas into luxury resorts, and Diriyah, restoring the historic city near Riyadh, are designed to convert Saudi Arabia from a purely energy state into a major global tourism destination. To fund this massive transformation, MBS oversaw the part privatization of the Golden Goose itself, Aramco. The initial public offering of a small percentage of the Saudi Aramco Oil Company was the single largest IPO in world history. While the kingdom only sold a small fraction of the company, the valuation was spectacular, confirming Aramco as the most valuable publicly listed company in the world. Crucially, the money raised from the IPO did not go to the general government budget. It was funneled directly into the Public Investment Fund, PIF, the kingdom's sovereign wealth fund, now personally chaired by MBS. The PIF has become the true engine of modern Saudi power and the private purse of the crown. It manages hundreds of billions of dollars, making massive, aggressive global investments, from buying stakes in US and European tech companies to funding sports franchises like the LIV Golf League and purchasing major football clubs. This is the ultimate evolution of the dynasty's wealth, transforming static oil reserves beneath the sand into dynamic, diversified financial assets across the globe. MBS is converting the inherent geopolitical power of oil into the silent, liquid, and ubiquitous power of global capital. The PIF's strategy of investing heavily in global sports and entertainment is not merely a business decision. It is a meticulously calculated move of soft power and reputation laundering, known as sports washing. Decades of strict religious conservatism, combined with controversial human rights records, have given the House of Saud a challenging public image in the West. The purpose of the massive global investment is to change the narrative from one of human rights to one of spectacle, excitement, and economic opportunity. The investments are staggering. Football, soccer. The PIF purchased the English Premier League's Newcastle United, instantly transforming a mid-tier club into a global contender, funded by Saudi oil money. Simultaneously, the Saudi Pro League began signing the world's most famous players, like Cristiano Ronaldo and Neymar, to enormous, record-breaking contracts, injecting billions into domestic sports. Golf. The creation of Live Golf, which successfully poached top players from the established PGA Tour, was a calculated disruption of a traditional Western sport, forcing the established order to negotiate directly with the PIF. Esports and gaming. The PIF has invested billions into major global gaming companies, recognizing that digital entertainment is the fastest-growing market for youth influence. The strategy is simple. When Western audiences think of Saudi Arabia, the dynasty wants them to think of world-class football, glamorous golf tournaments, and billion-dollar entertainment venues, not political controversies. They are buying cultural real estate in the minds of the Western public. Furthermore, these investments are an exercise in decentralized influence. By owning pieces of global culture, the kingdom creates a powerful constituency of allies, team owners, players, major media networks, and advertisers who now have a direct financial stake in the kingdom's stability. The Saudi royal family has learned that owning the narrative is often more powerful than owning the oil. The financial power of the PIF has transcended the role of a traditional sovereign fund. It has become a geopolitical reputation machine. Despite the massive diversification efforts, the House of Saud's ultimate survival remains tethered to two volatile relationships: the alliance with the United States and the rivalry with Iran. The rivalry with Iran. This is the dynasty's single greatest existential threat. The rivalry is a mix of ancient sectarian tension, Sunni Saudi Arabia versus Shiite Iran, and a modern struggle for regional supremacy. Every foreign policy decision, from the conflict in Yemen to the diplomatic moves in Lebanon, is viewed through the lens of countering Iranian influence. The Saudis invest heavily in their U.S. security guarantees precisely because of the threat posed by Iran's proxies and missile technology. The rivalry demands constant, expensive military spending, draining billions from the PIF, but it also justifies the absolute centralization of power under MBS as the necessary commander-in-chief. The alliance with the U.S., this relationship, forged on the USS Quincy, is now tested constantly. American domestic politics have shifted dramatically, with increasing scrutiny over human rights and internal governance. The oil for security bargain is no longer as simple as it once was. The House of Saud now operates on a sophisticated geopolitical tightrope, dipping the toes in the East. While retaining the U.S. security umbrella, the kingdom is strategically deepening economic ties with China and Russia. China is the single largest buyer of Saudi oil, and deepening this relationship provides the Saudis with a powerful counterbalance and alternative market, ensuring they are not completely beholden to Washington's political whims. Controlling the pump, despite Vision 2030, the Saudis remain the indispensable stabilizing force in the global oil market. They are the only producer with the massive untapped capacity, the swing capacity, to flood the market and crash prices, or to restrict production and send prices soaring. This unique ability is their ultimate, non-negotiable leverage over the entire world. The House of Saud knows that no matter how much tech or tourism they build, their true, irreplaceable power lies in the strategic control of the world's most vital commodity. They have mastered the art of playing East against West, ensuring that their alliance with America remains necessary, even if it is no longer comfortable. The final question regarding the Saudi royal family is, what is the true value of their private wealth, and can it survive the post-oil world? Quantifying the fortune is impossible for two reasons. The state is the family. Unlike Western monarchies, there is no clear legal firewall separating the state budget from the royal family's private accounts. A significant portion of state revenue, from oil sales to fees, can be channeled directly into the royal treasury without public accounting. The PIF's dual role, the Public Investment Fund, blurs the line between national investment and private royal asset management. When the PIF buys a football club or a tech stake, it is technically owned by the kingdom, but its deployment is controlled by the crown, effectively serving the dynasty's political and financial goals. While the official family net worth is estimated at $1.4 trillion, the sheer value of the untapped oil reserves controlled by the family, the state's future revenue stream, is the true measure of their power, estimated at over $25 trillion. They own the future cash flow of the world's energy supply. The dynasty faces three final, critical challenges that will determine their longevity. The succession test. The new centralized power under Mbop Salamad has stabilized the system by destroying the old consensus, but it has created a new risk. Any challenge to the central authority could now lead to a catastrophic winner-takes-all power struggle, unlike the cushioned consensus of the past. The social contract. Vision 2030 is slowly but surely unwinding the old grand bargain with the conservative clerics, introducing social reforms and loosening the rules. This risks alienating the conservative base that the Sauds relied on for decades, replacing religious loyalty with economic opportunity. The energy transition. Even if Vision 2030 succeeds, the world is moving toward renewables. The dynasty's ultimate test is the race against time. Can they convert enough of their hydrocarbon wealth into diversified, sustainable global financial power before the oil starts to lose its strategic value? The story of the House of Saud is the ultimate parable of modern power. It illustrates that in the end, it is not just the ancient bloodline, but the control over a single essential commodity that elevates a regional tribe to the status of global kingmakers. They took the dirtiest substance on earth and refined it into the cleanest, most absolute form of power. The oil may eventually run out, but the financial empire they built with it, the vast, unseen web of assets, influence, and global debt, will ensure the House of Saud remains a dominant force for generations to come.